It's wonderful to see so many of you here. Where else would you be? How else could you be spending your Tuesday evening? My name's Hannah McInnes. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all here on behalf of the How To Academy, of the Conduit, and also the Jewish Literary Foundation. To welcome you and to have this unique chance to discuss the book that has inspired the event this evening, What Will Survive of Us, and to delve into the mind it came from, who is, of course, sitting next to me. Howard Jacobson, as Rosie said, doesn't need an introduction. He's written 17, is 17 or is this the
17 novels and many works of non-fiction.
And many works of non-fiction. Of the many prizes that he's won, he has, of course, won the Man Booker Prize in 2010. With the Finkler question, and also was nominated again in 2014 for Jay, and many other prizes. But we need to get to the discussion. So Howard, thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a very basic question, before we delve into the actual novel. I love the fact that I think you're the first person I've seen whose picture is you sitting next to your dog.
How can I spoil this for you? It's not my dog.
No.
It's not my dog. I don't have a dog. Much is made in the novel of the hero wanting a dog and not having a dog. But that's the only resemblance between me and the hero in this, that we both would have liked a dog. I have a fantasy every time my wife doesn't know what I'm talking about. Every time we see a very big dog, she has a fantasy of a dog that she could put in a handbag. Yeah. I have a fantasy of a very, very big dog that I could put my arms around and we could have and wrestle. And we could. Then I imagine living in a house in somewhere like Richmond that goes down to the river and rolling down the bank with my arms around the dog. My wife thinks this is very strange. Is it strange? Is it? You see a big woolly dog and you just feel there's an idea of comfort and companionship that you can't get in any other form. But I'm not prepared to clean up after a dog, especially not a dog that size.
You're right. Your main character he also has that dream of rolling down
Yeah.
the hill with the dog. And you say the parallels end there. Does it infuriate a writer to be asked about the similarities with your main character?
Yes. It's maddening. But I walk into that and kind of do things deliberately to provoke it, really.
Oh, sorry. Could you hear me? Oh, good. But now even better, I hope. Yes.
My first novel was about somebody who worked in a polytechnic, and I wrote it while I was working in a polytechnic. But there was otherwise absolutely no similarity. But you can't tell people that. But I'll tell you what's annoying about it. It's as if it doesn't matter whether they think it. It's whether they think that's more important than the fictionalizing. Yeah. And for me, the fictionalizing is even if it's your own, even if every detail in a book is your own life, it's different the minute you write it. Yeah. The minute you write it, you change it. You give it the status of, let's be grand and say art, or at least fiction, and that's changed it. The two things are not the same.
And yet, you've seen the character recognises, or in the book, recognises the fact that we always do it, because Lily, who I'm going to ask you to explain who she is in a moment, says, Quaid says, the character speaking is hardly one whose opinions I share. Any resemblance is purely incidental, as you're saying. But she recognises whoever spoke the words, he wrote them, they had passed through him for a fleeting moment, the words, and he shared the same space and breathed the same air. And readers can't help, can they, but read into it.
And that's a very good point. Lily is very sharp. That is a really good point to make, I think, in answer to my insistence that it's not the same. Nonetheless, I don't anything that my heroes or heroines think, I don't necessarily think at all. And sometimes I might abominate what they think and say. But in reviews, people will quote what your characters say as though you mean it, as though it's your words, and that is very infuriating. But I think Lily's point, nonetheless, you might not think that, but the fact that you've written it means somewhere, it's come from you somewhere, and it's passed through your mind, and you've entertained it for a second. And that's a good point. I'm still thinking about what that means.
Before...
Because I didn't write it, Lily wrote it.
Yes, she did. And tell us, for those who haven't yet gobbled up the book, which is sort of wonderful and intoxicating, I forgot to say in my introduction, and is at the back of the room, and Howard will be signing afterwards. But perhaps you could, because we're going to delve into it and we're going to move all around inside their story, just set the scene for those here.
Well, it begins, the novel begins with the word kapow. Kapow.
That's a great one.
Because that's what Lily feels when she sees him. He also feels kapow, but he feels it a fraction or two later than her. And it's an issue between them. He feels bad if she thinks he didn't fall in love at first sight at the very second she did. And she's upset a little bit if he didn't fall in love with her at the same moment she did. But the reason he didn't is he's more guarded. He's a man, and therefore he's more frightened. He's a very fearful man. Although he has the air of a confident man, he's a very fearful man. All my male characters are frightened of something or other. Partly of being a man because they don't know what it is, and what your responsibility you have to yourself as a man. And being a man right now is particularly difficult because there's so many things you're not really allowed to feel. So quite early on in the novel we have scenes in which he remembers his English teacher, Miss Gore, telling him off for liking Marvell's poem to his coy mistress, because the coy mistress starts about admiring the woman's parts. And she thinks she shouldn't admit. She tells him, you don't admire a woman's parts, young man. So in that case, he doesn't know, where do you look? If you're not allowed to like this bit and that bit of a woman, where do you look? How do you look? How do you see the whole woman all at once? Which is what he wants to do. But by the time you're a man and you've tried very hard to see the whole woman all at once and not to look in the wrong place, you're tired. So he's worrying about all that at that moment of looking at her, but she can just go kapow. She's much more confident than him, and she knows what she feels. But anyway, it is very much about the falling. Who is it who said, "Who has ever loved?" I should know this. There is a poet. Who has ever loved and not at first sight? Who is that? It's some 17th century poet. Anyway, that idea that if you're going to be in love. Could be. Yes, it could be. Thank you. Could be.
Someone will have Googled by the end.
But the falling in love at first sight, I used to collect it. I had a little notebook when I was the point of this book for me, which my publishers have wisely, I think, and rightly called a romance, is it's the first time I've kind of gone into that without, for me, embarrassment. I've always wanted to write about love. I always have written about love, but I've concealed it because I'm embarrassed at how interested in love I am and how, call it sentimental if you like, I don't know whether that's the word, but how being in love, reading about other people being in love has always interested me more than anything else. So I write either about being in love, table tennis, or Jews. And there are no Jews and there's no table tennis in this novel. So I've left it room for love. I was going to say I used to keep a little notebook of scenes in books that I like of falling in love at first sight because I thought it was terrific. So I love all those operas I've just only recently been to see La Bohème again. And Rodolfo and Mimi, come on, you just come out drenched from it again and again and again. It's heartbreak, sobbing. And you look around and all the men are sobbing. The women are looking, thinking, it's a bit cold there. Why doesn't she wrap up? Why hasn't she got something warmer to wear? And the men are sobbing their hearts out because men know what it's like. And there's a very good D.H. Lawrence one. Is it In the Rainbow? When, is it Tom Brangwen sees a woman going by pushing a bicycle and he goes, that's her. Just that's her. And then I kind of waited really. When would my that's her? That's her meaning that's the woman whose looks I love That's the woman who makes my heart quicken. That's the woman I will live with forever. And I was kind of looking around for that, aged about 12, really. And then at last you get it. And when at last you get it, you then want to write about it.
Why have you lost the embarrassment now with this novel?
Because I'm 81. You don't look 81, Howard. No, I don't look it. I know, but that's what being in love does for you, you see. It truly is that. I might make fun of it, but it truly is that. I kind of don't care now. I don't know why I cared before. Why did I care about being a softie? I used to sit in the cinema and cry my eyes out and pretend I didn't. All my other male friends did cry. They cried. Really, really, the thing that made me cry more, soppy thing, the Student Prince. Do you ever remember the Student Prince? Mario Lanza is except that he'd put on too much weight, so he couldn't play the part, so it's only his voice, and I loved Mario Lanza. And he's the king is the regent. And he goes to Heidelberg and falls in love with a barmaid, who I think was either Anne Blythe or Jane Powell, the two I adored. And then his father dies, and he has to go, but she doesn't know he's the king-to-be. His father dies, and he has to go back, and he has to leave because the king can't marry a barmaid. And when he says goodbye to her, God almighty, and I just went to see it, and went to see it, and went to see it, and cried, and it's upsetting me to talk about it now. It is upsetting. So I was kind of hiding all this stuff, really, and enjoying being ironical, and enjoying doing the thing. It's lack of confidence. The comic art, which I think I was good at, but I perfected it in order to conceal other things. You hide things when you're being funny, and I hid all the other feelings I had that weren't about being funny. And I had a technique. Probably nobody has it better than I had it. And I can say that because it's nothing especially to be proud of. And that's when you get people to soar to a moment of high passion, and then you cut their feet from under them with a joke. Bang, and down they go. And I could do that. And readers would come up to me and say, why do you keep doing that? We're just enjoying that high moment. And I said, well, I'm supposed to be a comic writer. And then as soon as I said it, I thought, no, I don't really think I'm a comic writer. I don't want to be a comic writer. I'm a tragic writer. But I was denying the tragic part by cutting people's legs away from them with a gag. And I still have to work very hard now not to make that gag at the end of a chapter. Once you've got the trick of it, you just do it. That's the perfect gag. Belittling. The art of belittling. I knew how to belittle. And because I'm 81, I've just decided, are you really?
You don't look 81.
I thought my belittling days are over.
But it's interesting, you talked about it's a hard time to be a man, and you said particularly now. And in the book, the character, not you, but the character says it's always been a hard time to be a man, and talks very powerfully about the difficulty he has, which you're reminding me of expressing his emotions. And he doesn't have any friends. And it's a really interesting sort of thing that he lacks, that you, as the writer, are aware of. And yet you've seemed to know the power of friendship and what it can bring, because you write so authentically of Lily's friendships and what they bring to her life. And I'm just wondering if you think that is a problem for being a modern man, not being able to talk to friends in the same way that women can.
I don't know. People say, I don't know why I gave him no friends, because I've always had a lot of male friends and like being with male friends and like doing the things that chaps do. I like going to the pub and playing darts and snooker and table tennis and all that. I liked all that and had a lot of friends. Except at 81, most of your friends have died. This is the problem. Don't want to upset you all, but it gets a bit lonely up there when you're aging as a man. But I honestly don't know why I gave him no. I didn't know I was going to do that. It just seemed to me, this is what writing is like. I think when it's working well, you don't know why a thing is happening. It just happens. You can't obey everything like that, otherwise God knows where you will end up. But sometimes you just feel, I thought, yes, this character who I didn't properly understand at the beginning, and you should never fully understand them. There should always be a bit of a mystery to you. He just suddenly seems, he doesn't feel like somebody with friends. That could be because he was incompletely conceived. I'm prepared always to admit that. You know, sometimes you don't get a character right. Maybe I just couldn't think what this man would say with friends. But it seemed to me that there was some kind of necessity, necessity to be with women, a dependence on women that was at the heart of him, which I hadn't realized, that meant he wouldn't really, didn't matter whether he had a friend, and in the actual details of it, did he have a friend or didn't he, doesn't matter. What matters is he is the kind of man who needs a woman, who needs to be with a woman. And the more he was that, the more his character then evolved. Because this is the story in which it's kapow for her, it's kapow for Lily. She looks at him and she's smitten. And maybe she is smitten a second or two before he's smitten by her. But she is increasingly the stronger one. She knows much more about, well, everything, really. And he just follows behind. He wants to be in thrall to her. He's the kind of man who likes to be in thrall. I think men like to be in thrall more than is acknowledged. And I like writing about men who are in thrall. I would have no interest, which is why I don't write thrillers or anything. I mean, the idea of any man character I've ever written, knowing how to hold a gun. I mean, I very rarely know how to describe them driving a car or anything. They don't do. And when I think of the great male characters in the men in novels that I most like, they are often far gone, actually, in not wanting to be men at all. I think of the greatest of them is, I think, Leopold Bloom in Ulysses. You make a man not in charge of events. You make a man in thrall to a woman, maybe suffering great jealousies about the woman, and you then have a character to whom something happens. If you have a character who's in charge of things, give him a gun, he stops being interested, he's in charge of it. Let him be somebody upon whom the world makes an impression, and you've got so much more to write about. So I think the other one, the Philip Roth can't quite do this for me. Philip Roth can't relinquish the idea of the man in control. He can't. But Saul Bellow could. And what's it called? Herzog. Do you remember Herzog? We all read Herzog in the 60s. You're all too young. I'm 81, you see. And Herzog is one. Herzog is somebody to whom things have a character to whom things happen. And that's, for me, much more exciting to write about than to write about a character who makes things happen. I love Hamlet for 4 acts until he starts to make things happen. You're going to start killing people. Now, I like you when you can't. I like you when you don't want to. But he does have a friend. He has Horatio. And my hero wishes he had a Horatio.
He does. He wishes he had a Horatio to talk to.
Yes.
It's interesting because, I mean, Lily too, she is, as you write, mistress of her own life. She is in control. She's a fantastic character. I loved her. But she also has a lot that she isn't in control of. And also, you write about what society deems a woman like that. You say, you know, why... you say that in Lily, society would see her as someone who was sort of going against the grain. They wouldn't embrace her lack of control and her control over things.
Do I say that?
Yes.
Well, tell me more things that I've said.
I'm going to find it because I actually, as you can see, wrote "wow."
I like what you've done to the book. I like that. See, you can't do that if you're just reading things online. Look at that, the wonder of a physical book. That's
I'm
fabulous.
sorry, it's a bit
There are
wrecked.
a couple of pages you haven't marked, so I'm a bit...
You say, why do we look askance at such a person, especially when that person is a woman? Why do we call her ambition to negotiate life at the speed she prefers, giving and taking by her own lights, unbeholden to others, instability, she saves the state some money, etc. So...
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that. That's good, yes. Because we do think about... I think it was me, that moment I was arguing with myself, and I was thinking, is there a case to be made against anybody who knows what they want, she knows what she wants, she knows what she doesn't want. And then I was thinking, well, the world can judge such women cruelly, pushy. She's a pushy. And why? Whereas when it's the man that's pushy, that's ambition. That's all right. That's heroism.
I want to come back to another thing you were talking about, the character forming as you go along and not quite knowing the character at the start. And again, this is Sam talking about his playwriting, but only the act of writing will decide what the play is about. This is the best time, waiting for the about to reveal itself. Notwithstanding his reputation for being spike and unyielding, he submits ecstatically to the capricious wiles of language. The words will look after him. Is that how you feel? Do the words look after you? Could you just develop that so we can understand it?
Well, you kind of... I remember once at a literary festival about 5 years ago, someone asking me the question about how you write and how you start, and I was saying, you must never, ever plan anything. Don't plan anything. Don't put things on the wall. Don't go, don't put dates on the wall. The downside of not planning is everybody's the wrong age in my novel. An editor has to come along and go, I'm afraid that marriage is impossible. He's been dead 25 years. So you clean that up for me. So I can't be bothered with that. It's just a fag having to care about when they were all born or how old they are or anything like that. Don't put anything on the walls. Don't plan a plot. Let things come to you. You must not know where you're going. You must be surprised. Never, ever have a clue where you're going. And the audience started to roar with laughter. And I like it when the audience roars with laughter, but only when I've said something that I think's funny. And I didn't think that was at all funny. And finally I said, well, why are you saying that? And they said, well, we just had... I've forgotten his name. Very well-known thriller writer. In The Hour Before You. And he said, put everything on walls, plan everything you do, don't ever not know where you're going. But that's because he writes thrillers. And if someone's going to get killed by somebody at the end, I suppose you need to know. But the glory of it, the person I quote ad nauseam really is Picasso, who didn't write novels, but still. And he said, the glory of being a painter is at the end of every day, you do not know where on earth that painting came from. And it's never the painting that you set out to paint in the morning. It's something entirely different. And that is I still remember the excitement in my first novel when I didn't know what I was doing or how you do it, and suddenly seeing, it's like magic. It is godlike, because creatures come up out of the mud of your imagination or out of the mud of somewhere, and you don't know who they are. And then you have thoughts. You have a thought, a wise thought. Where the hell has that wise thought come from? I've never had that wise thought. But it's the wise thought that's created by the drama of the characters. And this, for me, is why art really is another thing and why it's so important, because it creates its own truths, and it's not dependent upon those other boring truths that we carry around with us, our political positions, our ideologies, what we think about this, what we think about the other, all that makes us so dull and so boring. We are entirely boring people when we tell one another what we think about anything. Or indeed, when we think about anything like that. It's only when, and this is why everybody really ought to be an artist, and it is in most people to be an artist if they're trusted, to let these things well up out of you don't. Where is it coming from? Partly in the painter, as in the writer, it's the medium with which you work, because the medium in which you work has a history. So for Picasso, only just to lift a brush is to be taken into the history of all those people who've wielded brushes before you, to see or to feel or to intuit what painter's done before. It's easier to understand in language. You write, and instantly you're hearing Shakespeare. If you're an English person, Shakespeare you're hearing. And then in this book, when I'm writing about love, I, who used to teach literature and used to teach 17th century verse, can't help but hear the metaphysical poets and John Donne all the time and so on. But it doesn't matter whether you know that or not. the language that we all have is a language laden with the history of things that have been said and thought. So we all possess the mulch, if you like, the mulch of art, out of which it will go if we will let it go. And by letting it go, that means not putting something on the wall, not needing to know the tyranny of knowing what we're doing. We must not know in art what we're doing. And that's why art's the most liberating thing, the most important thing that we do. If we have any future as a species, and it's looking dodgy at the moment, but if we do, it will be art that saves us. I don't mean the arts. I hate that argument. Oh, the arts are very important. They raise a lot of money, you know. I don't mean that. I just mean the primacy of the imagination. It's not me. Who is it said talked about the primacy? See, I hear Keats. You just start to talk about that, about how the imagination works, and you hear Wordsworth, you hear Coleridge. It's a wonderful thing, what we carry around in words, whether we have a library or not, and whether we've read those people or not, because they've got into us. They've informed. And they also make you very boring.
There's so many. I want to pick up on the fact that you said it's very dull talking about what interests us and perhaps the politics of everything. And it doesn't really politics and the outside world don't really come into this love story at all. It's all the language of love and them trying to describe their love. But that actually brings me to something that is another, important point. You say love remains the last of all inexplicable phenomena, but also he's forever, Sam, trying to give everything language. And in a sense, love is the thing you want to leave to be indescribable.
Yes, but language is also one of the places that you do love. Because, well, certainly for these two, who are wordy
love in
people.
Conversation.
Yes, but partly the talking to one another. And lovers, particularly as they grow older, come to value conversation more and more and more. It's more what they want to do. It's very good to have done wild, crazily sexual things at an age when you can just about get away with it. They're not young when they start. They're in their 40s. So anything that they do of that sort is always risky.
I mean, it's pretty wild.
And they go to sex clubs and they do quite wild things. But what's so good about that is that then becomes also part of the mulch. It isn't just that you need. It's very good for lovers, even when they've stopped doing things like that, to have done it. If you can somehow or other contrive to have done the most outlandish things, even when you've stopped doing them, then that's a history to draw on. It's it can be sad sometimes to hear people who've not done who wish they'd had a wilder life. We love each other, but we wish we'd had a wilder life. And you feel they think they're missing out. They think they're missing out on something, and they are missing out on something. You are missing out on something if you've not been sexually reckless a bit. I mean, the truly sexually reckless would think that what these two get up to is nothing, just nothing. They pop into a few, they're not exactly sex clubs, but the kind of S&M clubs, so you dress up a bit, and the woman wears high heel shoes, and he doesn't know how to dress, and he's very embarrassed by it. He's the one that suggests it, doesn't? So he wears a mask from the Venice Carnival and feels a prat. And when Lily at one point says, "Okay, we'll take off your shirt," and I will now, he buys her a whip because he thinks that's exciting. But the minute she actually wants to use it, I think she's being a little bit literal here. No, you don't want to do that. But I wanted to do it to make it at once, not arousing, intriguing, but also funny. Because some of the places that they go to are kind of... The thing about sex club, I don't know an awful lot about this. But I've been told, and I did do a little bit of... I won't talk about what I've done. I've been told. And what you discover is it's actually quite hard to find really glamorous places. There was a film that once tried, what was it called? Thank you. You all knew what I was talking about. I barely gave you a clue. And it was, I thought, pathetic because it did, because it wanted it to make everything so sort of exciting and beautiful and gorgeous. It just looked ludicrous. It's more down and dirty than all that, I have been told. And some of those places you'll find that some of these places are not in glamorous locations, but they're kind of in Streatham and Woking. And they're peopled by often taxi drivers in leather shorts, a room full of Woking taxi drivers in leather shorts. You're shaking your head as though it's the most appalling thing, but you may have enjoyed it, you never know. So there's the comedy of it. I mean, there's pursuing, to talk about sex is always to talk about a grandeur and an absurdity. And too grand and you make yourself ridiculous, and too absurd and all you're doing is sneering. So to get that balance between one and the other is a challenge for a writer, and I wanted to do that. And I wanted to give them the blessing of having done these things, which they won't go on doing, because they don't have to look into each other's eyes and go, oh, the things we didn't do. The only thing they didn't do is have a dog.
To roll down the hill with. And I mean, I do have to say this, but you did write about it. You did get that balance perfectly. But also it's exciting and it's dangerous. They are adulterers. They're going to these clubs. This is the love that they want. They want the love that isn't what they call a normal love or a conventional love. And they're worried that when they eventually get married and everything is legitimate, that it will ruin it. And I'm wondering that comment you're making on love, you know, does it need to have that danger for it to be the kind of love you're writing about?
I think, in fact, had you asked me to read anything, I would have read from some of that. I think one of the best pieces of writing in this book for me is when they do get married and they worry about, does that mean I should...
Would you like to read?
Can I read a little bit? Okay.
You got the bit there.
Does my voice carry all right without this microphone? So I don't have to... Okay. I'll just read a little bit. Is that all right?
Yes.
Because it's exactly on this subject. They get married. They don't want to get married. They don't know why they want to get married, but they get married. And they go to Bali. There's one or two crazy, I've had some crazy reviews for this book. Some of the stupidest reviews I've ever received in the whole of my life. You get stupid reviews if you write novels. Stupid, beyond belief, stupid. And several of them have complained that they go to Bali. I tell you now, they go to Capri as well. And they also make a film in New Mexico. That's the kind of pampered people, privileged.
So why did they complain about Bali?
They complain that they are privileged and can go to, as though it's my job in these hard times to write about. I've done that. I've written about teaching in Wolverhampton. I know what it's like to talk about. I can do deprivation. So they go to Bali. The feature of which the butler who shows them to their room is most proud is the outside shower, a simple bamboo spout protruding from the side of a rock on which orange and purple hibiscus grows and kaleidoscopic lizards take fright. Lemongrass candles burn around the heart-shaped pool. Totally private, the butler tells them with a smile, meaning they can swim here naked. Quaid kneels to feel, Sam Quaid, kneels to feel the water. Warm, warm. Lily has a flower in her hair. God almighty, Sam thinks, do I have the capacity for satisfaction equal to this? Dinner is a beaten copper platter of aromas, the bass sighs, throwing back reflections of the stars. They kiss each other with mouths tasting of champagne. How many days is it since they first kissed? They agree there has not been a single one of those days they have regretted. But what if this is the hour of hours, the peak from which no more can be expected, and all there is left to look forward to is decline? Each feels the other's nervousness. They get up from the table to dance slowly, no matter that it isn't dance music that the gamelan band is playing. Tightly, tightly, they cling to each other as on a boat that's slowly sinking. Over 14 days, they shower in the open, swim without clothes, inhale rare odours, dine on rare fragrances, sip sweet coconut milk, dance to music that isn't designed to dance to, repeat the rhyme of their extreme good fortune at having met, retire to beds of the crispest linen, and fall asleep. For his part, Sam marvels at the fairy spirits of his new wife, her floating golden on the perfumed pool like a princess from the Arabian Nights, her padding noiselessly through their marble rooms like a fawn, her sitting under the shower on the artfully arranged rocks, combing out her dripping mermaid's hair. But the sight of her so engrosses his senses that he wants nothing more, seeks neither to possess her nor to be possessed by her. And Lily too takes pleasure watching her newish husband crouching beneath the bamboo spout every hour that God sends, letting the water spill like stardust down his chest, then striding, dripping into the bedroom like the dog he is never going to have, without asking anything further, just one more bit. They have not stopped touching, but they touch with an unaccustomed diffidence. Suddenly, a touch is not a signal for something else to happen, nor is it in all circumstances as appropriate as it was before. Should he even be asking permission? Sam watches and waits. Lily waits and watches. Oh, sorry. I can't read it again. Sorry.
No, we've got the microphones. We'll have them back. And I know it's time for audience questions, but you read it very similarly with poetry, as similar to a poem as it can get. And at the end, you say, you're right. She knew that her consummated heart. Actually, I better not read. I'm not going to talk about the story. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to say that stories came to a conclusion. Poems turned this way and that, backwards as well as forwards, gathering memories and echoes about them like skirts. Where's the line between what you're writing and poetry? This is prose or poetry?
I felt that sometimes it was like writing a poem. That felt like.
Your microphone.
Sorry. I felt that I was almost writing a poem. The novel is full of the echoes of poems, references to poems. The writers that were most at work, I won't say influenced me, but that were most at work, consciously or not, were poets. Because poets have given themselves that task. What is love? You get that less in novels, where novels have people in love and then something else happens. There's a plot. Bloody plots. Let's make them in love so that then they can fall out of love, or one can kill the other, or something like that. Whereas a poem by Donne or Marvell or Thomas Hardy is much more likely to just give itself the task of what is love. That's really what I was doing here. What is love? And maybe that is more the business of a poem than a novel. But I didn't want to write a poem. I did want to write a novel. And if I could give the feeling of a poem. I've never seen myself as a poet. I've never tried. And when I do try, it's pathetic. But I'd like to have been a poet. And if at moments I achieve some of the beauty of poetry in my prose, then I'm happy. But you're right to pick that up. It's one of the book's ambitions, yes, to be a poem. And that's what he tells Lily. She gets very depressed and says, "We've not had children. What's all this for?" Later on in life, what's all this for? What do we leave? How will our story go on? How will it end? And he says, well, we're not a story. Love, the love we feel for each other, and love generally, it's not a story. It's a poem. It moves in a different direction. The story you feel has to have a conclusion, has to have an end. Love, he says, does not have to have an end. It moves in a much more circular way than that.
Yes, and that was her repeating and remembering his words as you described them.
Yes.
I have to give over my microphone to yourselves. I know that you always have fantastic questions here at the Conduits, so I think you probably have some microphones there. Yes, if you put your hand up high, we've got about 15. Yes, here we go. Someone brilliantly. There's normally a little bit of time when no one wants to, so thank you very much.
I'll happily go first. Thank you. There's nothing worse than an audience member kind of monopolizing and wanting to talk about things rather than asking a question, but I did want to start by saying a couple of very controversial things. One of which is that I do run a sex club, and it is a luxurious one, and if you ever need any insight onto that, you can ask me. And it's only for women, so maybe that's why it doesn't have those seedier aspects that you mentioned. And secondly, I came here tonight because the title of the event was Love and Desire, and love has been my greatest obsession, my greatest teacher throughout my life. And finally, after so much suffering and so much, just devotion to love, I think I've come to an understanding of what it is and what kind of love endures. Wonderful question. And I feel like our culture lies to us a great deal about love. We are fed so many stories, and I love that you said that it's not a story, it's a poem. And even more than that, I've just stopped reading novels because I feel like novels and everything lies to us about love. It creates a story, a narrative. And so I guess my question to you, and you sort of touched it, is there a truth that you feel you discovered through writing this novel about love? And what is it?
You haven't got a difficult question you would like to ask her. I'm fascinated by your club, and I wish I'd known about it, and because Lily might have liked to have gone there. I think she might have enjoyed this club.
I think she definitely.
Yes. And he would have been quite interested in knowing that she'd gone out there to it. He'd have had a good evening thinking of her out at that club. Sorry, I've just gone a bit dreamy here, imagining how he would have felt. I think one of the things I say in the book and think is that the minute love enters your life, you become more morbid. You fear, because you fear loss more. So that the minute love enters your life, so does death. And how does that help? Well, it doesn't, except to know it. Because it might be that much trouble is caused in the world of love and in the world of fidelity and infidelity, because people feel that the growth of that morbidity and think the only way out of this is to go and find somebody else. I think to face the fact that love will bring that morbidity, that we must fear loss. We must fear loss the more we love. It doesn't help us feel any better, but it unites us a bit, and that's not helpful in the slightest.
Can I just, do you think it's because you chose, as you've said, for your characters to meet and fall in love? She's in her 40s, he his 50s, or is that morbidity there even in young love?
I think it's always there, and I think you're too busy to notice it when you're young, when you don't want to notice it when you're young. And I think that's when you think, okay, something's not quite right here, I've got strange feelings, I'm upset, I'm worried, I'll find somebody else. And the chasing around that you do, and the belief that it's something else will give it what you want, something else will be better, might be. The thing about all, there's no generalization that works, but the thing about older love is it's less driven in that kind of a way. At least these two. These two do not think about finding other partners, whereas possibly had they met 20 years before, it wouldn't have lasted because they would have thought of. Now, why would they have thought about other partners if they cared about each other so much? What's the dissatisfaction that drives you on? And it might be the fear. Love creates fear too. If it creates death anxieties, then it creates fear. And maybe when you're younger in love, you're running away from the morbidity of love. I don't know, I'm trying to remember what it was too long ago, because I'm 81, so you don't remember.
You don't look 81. Is there someone else with their hand?
Thank you.
Could anyone raise their hand? Okay, great. Hi. My question is about how you write about love without making it overly sentimental, but still speaks to the truth that is love.
How do you do it? Well, who's to say I know, and who's to say I've succeeded? Very hard one, that. You find your own. A writer finds her own truths, and honesty is part of it. You see, the language is the clue. You keep your eye on the language. If the language is starting to over-egg it, if sentimental language gets baggy, and the best language for talking about love both creates the rapture, the way in which people in love are lost, but also somewhere or other keeps a critical eye on it. So when I say I wanted to stop writing a funny novel, I didn't stop writing a funny novel. This is a funny novel. Actually, it's funnier than I thought it was. I wanted to get rid of comedy more than I succeeded, and I'm glad I didn't, because the comic eye is the critical eye, and the critical language, language which is more acerbic and ironical, ideally will stop that. But it's balanced, because then you can end up just being, writing a nasty, cynical little book about love, which one or two reviews have made this book sound like. And they've loved it. Oh, this is a wonderful book. Makes fun of all of them. Makes fun of them all, the horrible people. Horrible people, they go on holidays a lot and they get their desserts. I didn't want to do that. So I think always a balance between the sense of tragedy and the sense of absurdity, which is true not true in the way we live as well. A good couple in love keep an eye on each other, keep an eye on each other's absurdity. And sometimes children will do it. Your children will let you know if they think you're being sloppy. And if there are no children there, then the couple has to provide the role of children for each other, which is what Lily and Sam do. They watch each other very carefully. They hear, they listen. And in the listening for absurdities and falsities, of course, in that act of listening, they are expressing their devotion, because that's the hardest thing for people who know each other well, to listen.
Hi. We always talk about falling in love or being blindly in love. We don't often talk about rising in love or standing in love. And I'm wondering, do we have to lose ourselves? What do we have to lose to? I don't know. Do you understand what I mean? It's like we lose something, don't we? We lose something of ourselves when we fall in love, but we gain something. I don't know.
Yes, well, don't we kind of know that at once? We do fall in love because we lose a degree of independence. We are no longer solely in charge of our own life. We hand something over to another person. It's like a gift. You make a gift of yourself. If you make too much of a gift of yourself, you might make then a fool of yourself. So that's another of the great tests. It's hard. It's work, actually. How much do you give? That's work. That's self-scrutiny. How much of yourself do you give? How much is too much? How much is the right amount? I don't think there are any answers to these things. It's a work in constant progress. But I do think it makes sense to talk about falling in love. I know what you mean about rising in love. You fall in order to rise again. D.H. Lawrence, my once hero D.H. Lawrence, not so much anymore, but he would talk about love and resurrection. And Lawrence is very interesting because there's always a moment in which he thinks, that's fantastic, Lawrence, that's fantastic. That's bloody stupid. Because you always feel with Lawrence that he is swept away by the emotionalism of what he feels, and he's not funny enough. At the moments when you just feel he just needs a little bit of cutting down there, he doesn't do it, can't do it.
Yes, the gentleman here.
Thanks, wonderful talk. And I take you back to the beginning, which was about friendship. And I'm sitting here reflecting on the difference between deep friendship and the kind of love that you've written about. And I think you're saying that with falling in love, there comes a point, if you're not careful, where you say, it can't get any better than this. That's what I think you were describing with that couple. It never seems to happen in deep friendship. You never sit there and say, oh no, I couldn't imagine being, feeling better about being here with you as a friend. Do you think there's a contrast there or not?
Well, I agree with what you've just said. Is it because however deep the friendship, as long as we are thinking of it as a friendship that's, unless we confuse it with, or unless we want that friendship to turn into love, in which case we're back with love again, we want less of it. We demand less of a deep friendship, however deep, than we do of the person with whom we're in love, because we want love to be everything. We do want love. I think we do want love to be everything. One could talk about the media feeding this and so on, but it goes back deep into literature and deep into art that love should be absolutely everything. And I don't think a deep friendship is required. Is it? Is a deep friendship required to do that? The moment a deep friendship is required to do that, then I think it's moved from a deep friendship. We do know the difference between friendship and love, and we feel love is more exacting and more demanding. We want to receive more and we want to give more. I think I've talked about what will survive of us, and from the Larkin poem, and partly he does mean that there's the lasting image of the couple holding hands goes on forever, but it's more than that, isn't it? I suppose I thought I was writing more than that by survive, more than that it lasts and you hope the couple will live a long time and so ever, but that it's an answer to some conundrum about life. What are we alive for? And many poets have thought and religions have thought we live in order to love, and therefore if we don't love, we've lost something. We've lost an essential ingredient. And I think when you are in love, when you are deeply in love, you do feel this is very nearly a solution to the enigma of life, which is why it's the thought of loss, the thought of death and fatality is so acute. But I wonder if there's an opposite to that, and that we go there and think about loss because there is nowhere else to go. That scene I read out is a description of somebody feeling there is no. Should they worry? They're both worrying. Should they worry that there's nowhere else to go now? What if there is nowhere else to go? And isn't that one of the challenges in love? Can you accept stasis, or does it have to be growing all the time? Or is growing in love actually accepting that status? Is that the highest maturity you can reach? This is it. We've got there. This is perfection. I want no more. She wants no more. He wants no more. But that then is a risk, because we are a very unsatisfied species.
Yeah. Time for one more.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I was wondering about identity and love, something that you've explored so brilliantly in your previous novels, and I haven't read this one, I must confess, but there's a sort of something in what you just said which was really kind of delving deeper. I wonder if you can say a bit more about those two themes. As
A bit more about what, sorry?
Identity and love.
I'm not good on identity. I never know what the word means. I'm trying to think what's your question searching out. Can you ask it without using the word identity?
Yeah, I guess who I am and who I love are sort of, deeply, it kind of calls into question that question of who you are, I think, as an individual, because sometimes notions that you hold dear about yourself are, swept away when you fall in love. And I think I'm just wondering about, because I remember reading Finkel Question and completely sort of, caught up in that question of who he is and sort of that, yeah.
Yes, that is a different question the characters in that novel ask. I'm wondering, trouble with this is I am capable of glibness. I am ashamed. You will have heard it. But sort of glibly, I want to say, I wonder if maybe one of the things that we look for in love and value in love is the idea that we don't find ourselves, but that we lose ourselves. I often want to talk about losing oneself, because when people talk about, finding yourself, young writers or people who do writing courses say, you must find yourself. And I always want to say, no, don't find yourself, lose yourself. Because the self that you'll find is probably boring and not interesting. Don't find yourself. You've found yourself. You've lived with yourself for years. Your problem isn't that you can't find yourself. The problem is that you found yourself and didn't like what you found. Lose yourself. And I think that is what love feels like, and that's why you have such a high regard. When you love somebody and you keep loving them, it's such a high regard, which is why it's different, I think, from friendship again. Such a high regard, and you need to maintain that regard. It's quite demanding, because if you're going to lose yourself to somebody, you want that person to be worth losing yourself to. So any perceived falling off in that person, then your disappointment is then not only a disappointment in that person, but a disappointment in yourself. So, one piece of advice to give is stay away from somebody who wants to be in love, because their critical demandingness of you can be a terrible thing. But if it's equalized, if it's great, if thou and I love so alike, that none do, what's the line, the Shakespeare, that none do slacken, none can die. If none can slacken, if you can love so alike and lose yourself in each other to that degree, then that is perfection.
And also an Auden line, right? If equal affection cannot be there.
Again, sorry.
The Auden line, which is the equal affection cannot be, then let the more loving one be me. Different thing.
No, I think that is a different thing, but it's. But have the courage to lose. I suppose if I were a sex counsellor, I would say have the courage. Do you feel you're losing yourself? Because you often hear people saying, "I feel I'm losing myself. I feel that this in my affection for this person, I'm losing myself." Do it.
I got that in the sense that you, when you wrote it had to be possible to shape-shift in the arms of someone you loved, and the roles all meld into one, and that's where I felt like identities were.
Yes, you're quite right. Yes, that's good. That's helpful, because he finds himself much less of a man than he feels he is duty-bound by his society to be. A man is this kind of thing, and the man, according to those rules, would not be doing what he's doing because he's yielding at that moment. And he's hoping that that's all right. It's all right, again, not to be yourself.
He says, who assigned these roles anyway? We better probably draw our conversation to a close. I knew your questions would be fantastic, and they absolutely were. And Howard, you'll be staying to sign for
all night.
So any questions?
I'll administer advice. All you have to do is buy me a glass of wine, and I'll tell you anything.
Buy him a glass of wine and you can explain what is love to each individual person when they ask. Thank you very, very much. It's a great privilege to hear. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you very much.